Who's on your board? Who are some of the directors and advisors you might meet when you first join a board? I'm Richard Winfield, and I help new directors and boards become more confident, more effective, more quickly. So, you have the opportunity to join a board. You're a new director. Who are some of the people that you're going to have to work with on this new board? Let's start with the power team. I believe that the power team is made up of the chairman, the company secretary, and the chief executive. The chairman's responsibility, obviously, is to chair the board. The chair's responsibility is to build a team of individuals into an effective board, and working with the company secretary to ensure that appropriate matters are dealt with properly at board meetings. The chair is also the figurehead and the public face of the organisation, representing the organisation to the outside world. The company secretary plays a key role, but is not actually a director. The company secretary is certainly a member of the board. And I say that the company secretary is the board's corporate conscience. It's the company secretary's role to ensure that the proper things are done properly, that the various submissions are done on time, and that the company works within its constraints. Working in conjunction with the chairman, the company secretary will manage and prepare for board meetings. Company secretary is particularly relevant to you as a new director because working in conjunction with and on behalf of the chair, the company secretary is responsible for designing and organising your induction program and also for managing your ongoing professional development. Chief executive is responsible for running the business and is the interface between the management and the board. You should have several non-executive directors on your board, and you might be one of them. It's particularly relevant that non-executive directors are also independent, which means that they haven't worked for the company or provided services for it, and they're not related to people who have done. The non-executive director's role is to bring in different expertise and experience and to challenge the management during discussion. It's important at an early stage to identify the relationships between the directors and the chairman and the chief executive, and particularly in a family-based company, there may well be one or more directors who are particularly close to one of the key players. There may well be directors who don't play a full part. Maybe they don't turn up for every board meeting, or maybe they do turn up, but they don't particularly contribute. They may also be there and participating, but their body language does not signify full involvement. It's increasingly important how boards engage with employees, and one way is to appoint an employee director. There are certain disadvantages with this. Firstly, the employee director cannot be independent. Secondly, there are confidentiality concerns, and thirdly, the employee director will have conflicts of interest. A better way to do it is to designate one director to be responsible for relationships with the employees and to report on their behalf and represent them at board meetings. It may be you'll meet a director like this, a know-all, who may or may not have a good contribution to make, but as you see from the participants here, their behaviour is not conducive to good teamwork. A drama queen may have plenty to contribute, but being over-emotional is not necessarily the best way to get their point over. In this case, this director has given up entirely. They may or may not have argued well, but there's come a point when they give in. However, you should be very aware that you're responsible for all decisions made by the board, and so you should be wary of giving in. If you do disagree, make absolutely sure that your arguments are well minuted. A rubber stamp is prepared to agree with anything, in which case, what is their contribution to the board? At some stage, particularly in a family business, it's likely that they want to bring on the next generation, and it will be valuable to get their contribution and to give them some experience before they take on formal roles. However, once again, if you appoint a member of the family onto the board, that is another director who is not independent, and you will need to ensure that there is at least one independent non-executive director to balance them out. Now, if we could just have a break for a moment and I could tell you about the Directors Academy. The Directors Academy produces distance learning resources for director development. Most of these are written by me, Richard Winfield. The foundation program is a 26-week e-course comprising of a weekly email and an audio which cover the basic roles, responsibilities and behaviours of directors. There are certain things that every director needs to do at induction, and the new Director's Induction Pack has been produced specifically to meet this need. The Essential Directorship Masterclass is my signature program. It involves more than 40 short videos, and it covers in depth everything that you need to be an effective director. It covers roles and responsibilities of directors, it covers corporate governance and finance, decision-making, strategy, etc. All directors should have some form of continuing professional development, and our CPD program has been designed to meet this. Each month you receive a 50-page booklet covering knowledge or skill relevant to your director's responsibilities, and also updates on latest publications, regulations, etc. The directors on a board are likely to have been appointed for their knowledge, expertise and experience. However, they need also to be an effective team capable of working smoothly together. KnowYourProfile.com is an online profiling system which enables you to understand better how individuals can and should relate better together. So, back to members of the board. It's possible that one of the directors will be a nominee, probably representing one of the major shareholders. The important thing for you and they to remember is that when they're acting on the board, their sole responsibility is to do with the long-term sustainable success of the organisation, not of the organisation they represent. All directors carry the same responsibilities and commitment to the organisation, and that includes nominee directors. Millennials are reaching the age when they may well be appointed to boards as directors. Furthermore, you may well find that a millennial is a major investor or shareholder, having been very successful founding an e-commerce or internet company. Millennials bring in a different attitude and are able to represent the next generation, and you should treat them with respect accordingly. Every board needs a nitpicker, somebody who will read the small print and can be relied upon to analyse the figures. In no way does that release you from the responsibility, but it's nice to know there's somebody there who enjoys it. Sometimes a nitpicker can be very irritating, and that can be valuable. Sometimes they can be very irritating, and you need to put them in their place. This is a challenge to the chair, and is another example of an individual director whose contribution needs to be evaluated carefully as to whether that's sufficient to balance out the negative impact on the smooth running of the team. A mediator can be very helpful in terms of managing relationships, particularly during conflict. However, you should be conscious that the job of a mediator is to mediate, but not to suppress conflict. The diversity quota. In some countries, there are rules which determine the minimum number of female directors on a board, and there may well be other constraints from shareholders or even in the constitution which affect the appointment of certain members of the board. It is increasingly recognised, however, that true diversity relates to experience, expertise and background, and in the appointment of new directors, boards should take account of these requirements. I have a saying, the curse of the great and the good, and in my youth, if you looked at the bottom of the stationery of many companies, you would see a list of directors which included the great and the good. There may well have been a member of Parliament, a knight of the realm, and a professor. However, my experience is that very often the great and the good do not make the best contributors, because there is a danger that they will see this as a sinecure and an honour. It's very often better to appoint people who are on the way up rather than people who've already arrived, because the people on the way up will have more enthusiasm and are more likely actually to be involved in the day-to-day activities. Now, finally, a member of the old guard. The question here is, are they able to make a contribution and to be fresh? And to the extent to which they hold the corporate memory of the organisation. They may well have been through similar situations before, and more significantly, they will understand better how and why certain decisions were made. So it may well be, particularly in a young company, that the owner-manager could benefit from the input of other experts, but may not yet be prepared to share responsibility by appointing them formally to a board. Furthermore, for an effective board, you need to keep the size relatively small. So a way round this is to have an advisory board. This involves appointing people who will be committed to the good of the board and who will bring particular contributions, but do not take on the formal responsibility and the legal responsibilities of being a member of the board as such. And these might well include specialist services such as a lawyer. These days, every board needs to have an understanding of cybersecurity, and it may well be in larger companies that you can appoint a cybersecurity expert to the board. But such experts are in short supply and are likely to be expensive, and a better approach might be to have one in a support role. Winston Churchill said that scientists should be on tap but not on top. And if you are in a technological company, you will need to ensure that you have access to the latest developments. And a means of doing this is to have a scientific or a technological advisor on retainer. A fixer, somebody who knows people and knows how to get things done. And they're likely to be useful to you in terms of advising you on what might be done and making arrangements to get things done. The third way of engaging with employees is to have an employee forum where a representative group of employees will consider requests from the board and will give feedback on behalf of other members. In a private company, there may be several members of the family who have significant shareholdings, and it's a challenge for them to be properly represented without flooding the board. And a means of doing this is to have an independent family council, which will consider the interests and long-term desires of the family and will then interface with the board as a group. In addition to individuals formally appointed to the board or to the employee forum or the family council, there will also be important advisors that you need to know or know about, particularly the auditor, who is likely to be working in the organisation at certain stages, and you will be dependent on good relationships with the bank manager. In addition, you might employ a lobbyist. This is somebody who can represent the interests of your organisation, possibly even through a trade organisation, on your behalf. It's a very lonely job to be at the top of any organisation, and part of the role of the chairman is to be a mentor to the chief executive. But it may well also be useful to appoint a personal mentor to the chief executive or even to the chairman. Finally, I do recommend that every board should have at least a 2-day residential once a year and a 1-day away day in between to consider strategy and the long-term interests of the organisation. And a facilitator will ensure that you get good value out of the time spent together. So you are a new director and you've had a chance now to think about the sorts of people you might meet. I wish you well in your career. I am Richard Winfield, committed to improving board performance. I help new directors and boards become more confident, more effective, more quickly. Thank you very much.